All right, well, let's jump in and get started. Thanks to our panelists for joining and leaning their expertise to us and all the attendees, and appreciate the attendees for joining. Excited to hear from our three experts on this topic. So we'll go through a quick agenda here. Very quick, we're going to go through some introductions to introduce our three experts that are going to be sharing their experiences with us today. From there, we have preloaded some questions that we've received that we're going to be starting and sparking the conversations with. After that, we'll have about 15 minutes of open Q&A from all of our attendees. And anyone that's an attendee, you can start asking your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or at the bottom of the Zoom link. And we will start using those during our open Q&A session and have our panelists answer those live. So we'll go ahead and get started here. We'll start introducing with Clare Peterson. So Clare Peterson, she is the Director of Customer Success at Route. A quick bio on Clare. She is a client management professional. She currently manages at Route as the director all of the customer success teams as well as the implementation departments. She loves connecting with customers. She's always finding ways to create creative solutions to their problems and really loves all things go-to-market. She's previously started and helped scale Thumbtack's account management team. And before that, she worked in marketing and ran a small business. When she's not working, you can find her cooking, skiing, or watching the Great British Bake Off, which is an excellent choice. So thank you, Clare, for joining us. We're excited to learn. The next is Saydie Blanchet. So Saydie is native to Utah and has been working in tech for almost a decade. She's had an excellent trajectory at Podium, where she began in about 2017. She started as a small business customer success manager. From there, she moved into the strategic team and then started managing a team of customer success managers. Currently, Saydie is a customer success operations manager. Last but certainly not least, JP. JP is a husband and a dad to 5 little ones. He loves to build companies, adventure outside, and specifically ride mountain bikes. With that, he's currently a ride leader with the Lone Peak High School mountain bike team and enjoys seeing all of the kids fall in love with that sport. He spent most of his career in tech, and he loves the energy and early stage to scaling technology companies. JP started his career actually speaking French in a call center, then quickly transitioned into leading the training and Q&A function. He's been leading customer-facing teams around the world for just over a decade now. Currently, he is the VP of Customer Success at Jolt, where they provide mobile software to drive operational excellence, focused mainly on the restaurant space, but it can be used for any deskless workers. So thank you again for our panelists and our experts here. I'm sure if I allowed everyone to come off mute, you'd hear some applause and cheers, but everyone is on mute, and I am sure everyone's just as excited as I am to learn. So let's jump into the themes and introduce our topic for today. So the topic for this expert chat is we're going to talk through how to advance your career in customer success. Now, some of the early questions that we've gathered and populated, we categorize them into 3 main themes. And these 3 themes is really where we're going to stick for our open session today. So first one is how to get started in the customer success field. Now, this can be for anyone that is fresh out of college, looking to transition their career or wanting to just make an entrance in tech, or could be someone that is recently laid off or looking for a new role. Advice and tips on how to get that next job. The next one is once you're in there, how do you progress? How do you set a good trajectory into a senior or enterprise customer success manager, or transition into a more strategic role such as in operations or entry-level leadership and team lead? Lastly, we'll touch on how to make the transition from there into mid and senior level management, such as directors, senior directors, VPs, and so forth. So, and again, after that point, we will have our open Q&A. So please start asking those questions, and thank you to those that already have. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and let you look at better faces than mine here, and we will start the question. So I've known Clare personally for a few years, and so I'll pick on her to start our Q&A off. I wanted to start this conversation with Clare, and then JP and Saydie, both of you, feel free to jump in and answer as well. But I wanted to ask first, in your opinion, what are the most important skill sets for a customer success manager to be successful?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think so. I kind of have an out of the box answer that I always give for this, which is humble, hungry, and smart, right? And there are so many things that encompass that. But I think if I were to kind of rank those, I think hungry would be first, right? So it's someone who is naturally curious and likes to not only get to kind of like the actual like peel back the layers and understand what the customer's needs are, but is always looking for ways to improve on processes to help others. And then smart, right? You're implementing hopefully good decisions, and if you're not, you're learning from it. Favorite phrase in tech is, well, we learned a lot, right? Which I think is a classic. We messed up and probably won't do it again. Let's hope. And then humble, right? So humble to know that your decision isn't the best one always. But I think kind of like thematic throughout my career and people who I've seen really excel is with that hunger, sort of just this dedication to self-development. And I don't think that that's necessarily unique to CS as a role. But I think that those are the most successful people that I see in general, right? Who take feedback and implement it and learn, and they are that sort of hungry and that natural curiosity in terms of how can I do better and how can I better understand your problem and how can I know that growth is, areas for growth isn't something to be sad about, but it's something to be excited about, and continually celebrate those wins when you get them.
I love that. Appreciate it. JP, Saydie?
I like that. Hungry, humble, and smart. That's a great set of three attributes. Maybe one comment on hungry. One thing that I look for in candidates is this ownership mentality, right? This buck stops here kind of mindset, which is that, if there's a problem, solve the problem, figure out how to solve that, and use your smarts to get there. Lots of different things show up on your plate as you manage a book of business. So being hungry and taking that ownership to the next level will help drive both your skill set forward and the company's value. So ownership is another key element in there that I think fits into your trifecta.
Yeah, I love both of those answers. And I almost feel like my answer is the same, but in different words. But at Podium, I interviewed CSMs for a long time. And two of my favorite questions that I feel like anybody could answer, regardless of your background in tech. In fact, side note, one of our best CSMs that had like the best trajectory at Podium since I've been here actually managed some retail stores before they came to Podium. And they grew so quickly. And I would say the two questions that I love asking, one of our values at Podium is be a founder. And that is that sense of ownership. Like, are you going to take a problem from the start to the finish? So we would display that value. We would ask, when did you see a problem in your last workplace? And what did you do to fix it? And I feel like it can tell so much about a person if they're going to take that problem and see it and hold people accountable and be able to finish it all the way through was huge. And then I would say the second one is having hard conversations with both coworkers and clients. So another question we would ask in interviews is, when was a time that you disagreed with a coworker and what did you do about it? Again, it's super telling if you can, and the answer I would always look for is having a direct, hard conversation, but being able to compromise and come to an agreement, and then be able to continue to work together without conflict. So if somebody could do that, I was like, this is killer. We'll figure it out. And then the problem solving too, it was I don't care their technical ability, but if they can do those things, they're going to figure it out and they'll be successful.
Yeah, I love that. Having hard conversations and knowing how to communicate that directly. I think that's incredibly important. So thank you, Saydie. I wanted to follow up, leading into another question here, and maybe put you on the hot seat a bit. Interviews are, everyone needs to be able to come prepared to an interview, whether you're interviewing for a new role at a new company or potentially interviewing for a promotion at your current role. What are some of your indicators in an interview, or how do you know within the first 5 to 10 minutes that a candidate is one that you want to be interested in or one that has high potential?
Ooh, that's hard. I'll lean on like JP and Claire for like maybe external interviews, hiring. But something I thought of right away was I got the opportunity to interview people internally for team lead and manager roles. And something that always stood out to me, and I think you can read this in an external interview as well, but somebody that came to me with solutions and ideas rather than like problems and almost like complaints, like things that the reasons they didn't succeed, they like kind of made excuses a little bit, which I hate to say that, but like, I love when somebody can take ownership of problems that they've had in the past. I mean, another question we would ask is, when have you failed? Like, when did you fail? And I love being able to see in an interview somebody like own up to the fact that like they learned, like what Claire said earlier, like they learned from their problem, from something that they did, they took full ownership of it, but they're better for it, is also huge to me. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think it shows a level of humility, in my opinion, if they're able to do that. It's great. JP or Claire, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love conducting interviews. They're one of my favorite things because I think you learn so much about like what to do, what not to do. I think the biggest thing for me, one, general is just preparedness, right? Did you research the company? Did you research me? When you get to, I think questions for me is one of my favorite parts because I think that's a really clear indicator of how much work you've put into this ahead of time, right? And there is that correlation of like how much work do you put in ahead of client calls? How much work do you put in ahead of like QBRs, things like that. So if you're asking me sort of how long I've been at the company, something that you can very easily find on LinkedIn. I'm less interested than if you come with like an amazing question. And I write down a list of all of my favorite questions that I have received from people. And I remember those people. And I think nothing will turn around an interview more than, if I'm on the fence and you have really stellar questions, I'm definitely more likely to push you through. Right. But I think for these interviews, it's, doing research with kind of people in the industry, right? So if I'm moving into, and I know we're kind of branching into this potentially, like if I'm interested in operations or leadership, am I doing my research? Am I asking people, what types of interview questions would you prepare for? Ask a friend who conducts interviews, even if it's not in your industry. It's great to get tips on how to conduct yourself and how to prepare, and great to go through mock interviews because we all know interviews are kind of unnerving for people, especially earlier in your career. And so the more practice that you can have, the better. And I think when you come in and you feel at peace and you feel prepared, that shows. And I think that also is a reflection of sort of the effort and questions and curiosity that you put into accounts. JP, do you have anything?
I'm going to build off of yours, but it's really around having some passion for the product that you're applying to work with, and having some passion for the role that you're looking at. So going into the due diligence on the role, making sure you understand exactly what you're able to bring to the table, how the product is going to contribute and solve problems for your customer base. I mean, making sure that you bring that energy into the conversation so that I can tell that you want to be there. You want to help solve this problem with us. That goes so far in my book as you bring all your energy and focus to the table. It goes back to that ownership, right? If you're willing to invest before an interview, you're going to invest when you're in the role.
Yeah, I love that. And sometimes I'm not, to Saydie's point, like there aren't answers that we're looking for. It's just perspective. And sometimes there aren't perfect answers to every question. And that is a reflection of sort of a well-balanced team, right? So I have people who approach a problem this way and people who approach a problem this way, but I'm looking for someone who is confident in how they think they would approach it and can back it up. And to Saydie's point of like, how was I wrong? It's not sort of, I'm not trying to trick anyone. I'm just trying to see that, to JP's, that extreme ownership of I did this and I learned from it, and this is how I prevented it from happening again in the future.
And so Sadie, you talked a little bit about hiring internally. We hire a lot of new CSMs into the role, and say they don't have specific examples that they can talk to from previous CSM experience. But if we talk about retention or growth or other metrics that a CSM is measured by, there are lots of different experiences that you have in everyday life that can speak to how you've retained a friendship that was at risk, or retained some service. There's lots of different examples that you can bring to the table. And so as you're talking through those examples, what I'm looking for as part of this is to make sure that you've been able to maintain a high level of trust with whoever you're working with, because trust is what a lot of these relationships are built on, and is if you've been able to showcase that you've maintained that trust in a personal environment, you'll do that in the business world as well.
Yeah, I think that personal skill is like so valued. There are certain CSMs that we've hired that I know, regardless of the knowledge they have of the technology, or regardless of how long they've been at the company, I know I could put them on the phone with a customer and they would be able to talk to that customer about the product, or even say, give the customer that trust to follow through and deliver on whatever ask they had, just because they can navigate a personal relationship and a phone call, it's crazy. I feel like when you get to a place in your career where you're like, put me on the phone with anybody and we'll figure it out. Like we'll get to a point where I can get you the answer, and I can instill trust that I'll get you the answer, even if I don't have all the knowledge right now. Because I think sometimes people get hung up on the knowledge. I remember when I first interviewed here at Podium, I was working at a payments company before, so it was very different. And I was doing more like of a technical account management role. So I was like troubleshooting APIs and like these things. And I remember in the interview, I was like trying to think about like how I could display like my technical skills. And he didn't ask anything about it. And I remember telling him like, yeah, like here's the experience I had. And he goes, oh, you won't be doing any of that here. And then when I got to Podium, it was much more relationship based. So every role is very different. But I think if you can establish that, like, that trust, that relationship base, like you'll be successful.
I love that. It's a great conversation. And a few of you have mentioned indicators in that interview, and I want to pivot, but maybe touch on the first question that we asked. If you're in a role, if you're a customer success manager, you as leaders in various positions and roles, I guess, what are your indicators of a high successful CSM? Different from the skill sets potentially, but how do you know that this customer success manager is ready for their next promotion, is ready for that next strategic role? What are the specific indicators in that individual that you look for? And maybe I could put JP on the hot seat. He's been in basically every role from an individual contributor up to a department head. I would love your thoughts on that.
That's a really interesting question. What are the indicators that showcase you're ready for a new role? In my experience, a lot of times it's that the individual has progressed to a point where they're starting to act as a lieutenant to that role. If it's a leadership role, if it's an individual contributor role, they're performing at the same level characteristics wise so if you're moving from an SMB CSM role to a mid-market CSM role, one of the things that we look for is their ability to manage projects, and make sure that they go from some of the smaller, more tactical projects to bigger projects, right? Where you get into some more technology, maybe managing the implementation of an API for a more strategic customer. So when an SMB CSM has that project management aptitude and capability, and they start to showcase that in a stronger fashion, then I know they're ready to take on more strategic projects within the organization. And that flows through as you progress up the ladder. So some of the key indicators for us are project management. They're moving to more of a data-driven mindset. And then being able to make really strong business decisions, right? The ability to showcase and understand the impact to the business and the customer, and make sure that partnership stays healthy.
Yeah, I love that. Claire, Saydie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think similarly, I love that sort of like broadening that skill set to something beyond your realm. I think when you start to think sort of from a team level, right, where I can understand that I have an issue with this account, I have resolved it, but potentially it affects my other accounts, and then potentially it affects all of my segments accounts, and then the team's accounts, right? When you start to um, lean into helping others and having that good proactive communication on what you're doing, and then I think just seeing a ton of growth and progress, right? So where, hey, it's clear that we've set these in your 360s or our one-on-ones, and that person is taking that ownership, similar to what JP touched on earlier, is if not me, then who, right? And so I think a lot of times CSM sort of expect this, like, hey, we've laid these tracks, we've laid this foundation, you just have to like go down this path, right? And it is very much not that. It's sort of, this is what I want, right? So good communication and like, hey, this is my goal. I would like to be on a leadership track, or I'd like to be on an IC track. This is what I'm working on to get there. And I would love your feedback on, how I'm doing. And then I'm giving those proactive check-ins on it. And so when you see a ton of that ownership and growth, I think that's a great indicator, and certainly along with results of how the individual is performing.
Yeah, I will add on to that. I think sometimes we assume our managers will help us create that growth for us. They'll see the strength in us. They'll, and what I found is in my career, I've had to advocate for myself a lot of the time and make sure I'm very clear with the people that are managing me, what my next step is or what my goal is. I'm pretty aggressive about friendship, and I'm pretty aggressive about mentorship in the same way, that if I see somebody that I work with that I'm like, I really want to be them. Like, I will ask if I can spend time with them. Also because people love to talk about themselves and people love to be flattered, as terrible as that is. So I love reaching out to people and being like, I think you're awesome at your job. Can I like meet with you sometime and, chat through like some next steps? And I feel like then all of a sudden you've got like kind of like an inner mentor, which has been really helpful for me. And then I feel like it allowed me to realize what I wanted to do next, because I had interviewed so many people, and then helped me advocate for myself with my current manager, what direction and what step I wanted to take, and then go back to that mentorship and figure out the actions that I needed to do to get there, which was really helpful. But another thing I looked for in promoting or knowing somebody was like ready for the next step is, I take this quote a lot. Somebody at a previous job told me that you should always try and make your boss's job easier. And so that's something, I mean, as a manager, when I was like, oh, I know that I can always rely on them. They've always been so helpful. They do lean into that like natural leader throughout the team. They help other people, learn and things like that. So, which I think is what both JP and Claire said as well.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe pulling on this thread just a little bit more. So we've talked about the skills that we look for in CSMs. We look for what attributes or things that validate that they're ready. Maybe what are a few tips that you can give to CSMs that are attending that they can start doing today to be ready for their next promotion? Or from your own experience, what are things that you did to move from a CSM into a strategic or a leadership role?
I can start us off just because I'm kind of in that mindset now, thinking about, I've had a pretty interesting growth at Podium. I've been in a lot of roles and have been able to grow. I've been fortunate enough to do that, but there've been several times where I was like, I don't know if I like this, if and something that a person told me to go do, just a mentor of mine, she was like on the enterprise CS team and I was on the SMB team at the time. And she said, write down everything you love about your current role and everything you don't like. And then when you're looking for your next opportunity or your next role, you can kind of compare it with that current list. It just gives you a good idea of what's going to be a good fit for you. I do think every role is going to have things that are hard and challenge you, and don't shy away from the challenges, but like the things that innately just make you dread work. Probably, I don't know, that skill was really, I mean, that like practice was really helpful for me to figure out which path I wanted to take. And then along with what we've been talking about on like skills that you can do to, you know, advocate for yourself and things like that. I think they should start having those conversations with their manager. And if your manager isn't regularly having one-on-ones with you, schedule them. Like you should take like advantage of that and schedule the one-on-ones with the people you either want to be like or your direct manager. So whoever is going to be promoting knows that that's what you're looking to do as your next step.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that I borrowed from a former colleague was, I think a big pivotal turning point in my career was getting feedback, and getting feedback that was in a way that people felt comfortable to deliver it to me, right? So when I first started managing, I thought I was doing great, right? And then I sent out an anonymous survey to the team and realized that I had some major gaps that I needed to work on. And I think a big realization for me, I mean, I'm from the East Coast, like I'm fine with direct feedback. I think that I didn't realize how difficult it would be for others. And so creating as many avenues as you can for people to not only deliver that to you, but then for you to celebrate it and implement it, are so incredibly important, because that feedback that you get from other people are things that maybe you might not realize, or a lot of times people don't even take the time to sit down and reflect on things that could be better. And so I think that force function of sending anonymous stop, start, continue surveys, which is something that I borrowed. It's just quick, easy, and good opportunities for you to say like, hey, what am I doing really well at? What would people like to see more of? And what do I maybe need to rein in a bit?
Great answer. Yeah. I love that your East Coast background has made you so put you in a situation where you can enjoy direct feedback. Right, that's not easy for everybody, and so hats off to you. That feedback is invaluable, right? So I think that's great advice. If you can start sending out surveys like that, or talk to colleagues, find a mentor who will give you real, candid feedback and enjoy it. That'll take you a long ways. One pivotal moment for me was actually when I got turned down for a job. I'd been in the role for a long time, and I was looking to do a bit of a shift. I was moving from CS into product management. And initially I was turned down, and the feedback I was given was that I wasn't a strong enough leader. And that really hurt. It hit home, right? I'd been in the role for a while. I had some informal leadership responsibilities that I was working with my teams on, or my peers. And so I felt like I had already done that. But on reflection of that, I really took the time to think that through and understand what else I could bring to the table. And a year and a half later, I applied for that role again and was able to land the role based on changes that I'd made from the initial conversation and the initial failure to get the job. So internalize those and don't stop when someone says no.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Great advice. And maybe let's shift the question a little bit more. Let's talk about going into a leadership or going into a strategic operational role where you're managing processes, where you're managing people. What are some of the biggest learnings that you had, or maybe, biggest failures that you had when you first moved into a leadership role that you wished you would have known sooner? Claire, would you mind starting?
I've got lots of failures to this. So, and point of clarification, I did not ask for feedback in time. And so by the time I got it, it was brutal. And I think that asking for it often and early makes it less harsh. And so when you do get it, it's not 180 from how you thought you were doing. But so I think going from individual contributor to people leader, especially internally, is one of the most difficult transitions that you can make, right? I think that it shifts your relationships with your colleagues. It's very difficult because potentially some of your colleagues may have applied for that role and not gotten it. And I think for me, it was very hard because the things that made me successful as an IC did not make me successful as a leader necessarily, right? It wasn't this one-to-one. So the things that made me successful as an IC is, like I can work harder and it will be better, right? Whereas those who are in leadership realize it isn't as maybe glamorous as you had once thought, where you could work hard and try a million different tactics and none of them work. And so, you can't manage people the way that you manage yourself. I think that was the hardest learning for me. And you have to, meet people where they are. And so I think I constantly was, checking lists and what's my progress from last week. And if that's how you manage people, you're micromanaging them, and nothing will have them kind of want to pull their parachute sooner than that. And so I think taking that time to build trust and reestablish and show that you are truly there to help them is incredibly pivotal. And I think ensuring that you have support from your leaders as well, because I think without that support and recognition from your broader leadership team and that reinforcement of sort of like, we feel really confident that this is the person for the job, that makes the transition all the harder.
JP or Saydie, any thoughts?
I can go. Yeah, same with Claire. I feel like I have made some big mistakes in leadership. I also think I don't know how you do this test, but figuring out if you do want to move into people management rather than continue your career as an individual contributor. And that self-reflection will do you wonders. I mean, I've kind of just tried it all, failed at things, and then figured out what I really am passionate about. And can honestly say, like, sometimes I like people management, but I almost sometimes lean to be like really liking being an individual contributor, sorry. But something that I've done in leadership, so if you are in leadership, that I failed at, is I'm really guilty of compliment sandwiching people, because I'm also not from the East Coast. I am like, feedback has been hard for me. I have a hard time sometimes giving feedback. And so I had a CSM that we did have to let go at one point. And, but I had given the CSM feedback several times, but it was in between two compliments. So I would say, you're doing great at this, but let's work on this. But this is great, because I was so nervous they would hate me as their manager. And the truth is, when we ended up putting them on a performance plan, she was super shocked. And I feel like that was a huge failure on me. When somebody's going on a performance plan, they should be fully aware that that's the path that they're on, because you've given very candid feedback up to that point. And I learned very quickly that you're doing nobody any favors by not providing them candid, good feedback so that they know they need to improve and grow. And I would say, like, just the two books, like Radical Candor, if you haven't read it, that one has helped me a ton, because it talks about you need to, care personally before you challenge directly. And then the other one that I had when I moved into leadership was Bud to Boss, because the same thing, you're sometimes going to start managing people that you were working really closely with, and that can present a lot of challenges. So I like those two books.
Great books.
Right.
I would maybe double down on Saydie's comment around making sure you want to be in a leadership role and a people management role. That is a really big change, and a lot of hard decisions, hard conversations, and hard situations are presented to you that you may not be ready for. I think in a corporate America, in general, maybe in the tech space more than Fortune 500, but there's not a lot of training around leadership that you can take advantage of. There's some great books that you can read, but in my roles, in my progress, I didn't get a ton of training specific to people management when I became a people leader initially. So If you don't get that internally, make sure you do some work outside of work to learn that skill. And it is a skill that you need to develop. But also in the back of my mind, I just want to remind everybody that a decision to go a certain path is not final. Kind of as Saydie has outlined, she's jumped around in her organization quite a bit. And I've done the same. I've been in a lot of individual contributor roles. And it wasn't until I was really ready to take on people leadership the second time that I really started to progress in that space. And so make sure you're ready and realize that decisions they don't have to be final. If you jump into a people leadership role and you realize that this is not as comfortable as you wanted it to be, you're not getting the satisfaction that you wanted from the role, you can change, right? We've built the growth path in our organization, so there's tons of flexibility between IC and leadership. And we built it specifically for that reason. We want people that have a broad skill set so that they can develop in a lot of different ways and make sure that they're progressing on their timeline and progressing to the goals that they have.
I love that. And this is actually a perfect transition point in this conversation to move into some of our questions that we're receiving from our attendees, because one of the questions is very relevant here, which is we've talked about moving into a management role, and just like JP said, it's not the end. So the question is, how do you know which transition is right for you? How do you know, should I stay an individual contributor and work through that transition panel or that trajectory, or should I move into a operations role or a leadership role? How do you know what transition is right for you?
I've got some momentum. Similar to what Saydie said earlier, one of the best things that I think you can do is find a mentor. Find someone in a role that you're looking at and get their advice. Dig deep with that individual and find out what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and really understand the nuts and bolts of what that next role will be so you can make an educated decision, right? It's really easy to look from the outside in and say, man, that's a flashy role. That's the one that I want, right? But find out what's difficult on the other side of that before you make the decision.
I love that.
I love that. I think that's, sorry, Saydie. I think it's super valuable to get that insight, because I think sometimes people think leadership is something different than it really is. And I think that maybe it's like, oh, I get to be a part of these decisions. I get to be in this room where, things are decided and then I'll feel, fulfilled. Right. And I think it's, the non-glamorous parts are that leadership is a service, right? And so all of the wins are theirs and all of the losses are yours. And I think some of that is behind closed doors. And those are things like, if you are someone who, I think it's really hard for some people who really like to get the credit to transition into that. Because certainly, like, if my team is performing well, yeah, it's a win for me for sure. But I have to, dine on crow once in a while. And those are things that I don't share. And those are the things that I then figure out, how do I go back to the team and meaningfully share conversations that I'm having, and why it's important that we're making this change, or why it's important that, we focus on certain numbers or initiatives for the quarter, but in a way that is still, kind and understanding. And I think it's a lot of figuring out that it's a different skill set and being okay with that, because things aren't always what they seem. And to JP's point, like, if you get a mentor or a couple of mentors, and I'm a big fan of a bunch of different perspectives on a similar role, because I think that people approach things differently and love things differently. And so, it's certainly not a one-to-one, and making sure that you go in eyes wide open of saying, like, hey, I actually really like not having constructive feedback given to me by 7 different people every single week, right? Or, hey, I really like the fact that I can just, like, put my nose to the grindstone and pump stuff out and finish it and feel like I have a tangible thing that I worked on and I can be proud of. There isn't a magic bullet. And I think to Saydie's point, like you can take a million different tests and you can get mentors and bosses and all this input. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, it's like, what do you feel fulfilled by, and what do you feel passionate about, and where is that natural skill set, and finding that sort of Venn diagram of where those align is probably directionally your best bet.
Yeah, I agree. Claire also mentioned, it might have been Claire or JP mentioned, a sign of somebody that is ready to move on gets a little bit more data driven. And I would say right now, currently, if you're in a role, I think if you can like action on this, it'll help you in whatever role is. Figure out what in your role, across everybody that's in your role, how could it be improved? Especially like operationally, that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at. Is I took on a project. It was way outside my wheelhouse. I took on a project to do CSM bandwidth tracking. And I, coming from like managing clients to like, okay, let's dive into the data and see like how we can best use our CSM's time proactively versus reactively to get the results that we want, which is like decreased churn, increase expansion, things like that. So that it was a really, really challenging project because I never worked that much in the data, but it was really, really it was cool to see. And then I feel like, to go back to what Claire said, is I kind of found a passion in that, a passion in like digging into, wow, I had no idea we were spending 50% of our time on X, or, and I started to just like find a real passion in driving efficiency. And so I would say in your role right now, take on projects or start questioning why you do things the way that you do. And you'll find either, that passion and drive towards people management and leadership, or operationally, or just overall get better at your job, and then increase in being a CSM and move on to like a strategic enterprise director role, things like that. I feel like one time somebody told me this, and I feel like it stuck with me. In my first job out of college, she said, learn everyone's job around you, and then you will always be irreplaceable. And she's a huge mentor to me, and she's actually still at that same company, but she every time she tries to leave, they are like, we can't leave, you can't leave, like we need you here, because she's done that. She's reached out and learned everybody's job, and then has helped like her own productivity by knowing so much and learning. And it's made her absolutely irreplaceable for that company. So I think that's also a good hot tip.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love this. And we're hitting a hot topic. We've got a flood of questions from our attendees around going into management, team leads, and promotions. So maybe going into a promotion path, we have a few questions here. The first question is, it says, when seeking promotions, what suggestions would you have for balancing your expectations versus your managers, as well as your manager and leader to notice your contributions versus you going out of the way to highlight your own wins or successes with leadership? So I guess, when seeking a promotion, what balance do you find in letting the manager notice you versus you coming to them with your contributions?
I think that you can sort of do it in a tactful way that I think if people have a hard time tooting their own horn, right, and don't want to feel like constantly like coming and putting their artwork on the fridge, so to speak, right? It's this way of one of the things that we've done is sort of like wins, challenges, roadblocks. And so highlighting the good and the bad, right? And where you could utilize your manager's help and where you've really succeeded. I think making sure that you have a leadership team that continually highlights those wins, right? So I think a lot of the things we get credit for are that retention and expansion, right? Like that's CS in a nutshell. And those user stories are incredibly powerful. So even if you do it in a way that it's like, hey, I found that this particular way of phrasing something was super helpful for resonating with my account, and I wanted to share it with you or with the team. That's a great way of doing it, but making it sort of a part of your routine of this is what's going well, and this is what I could use your help on, is a way to highlight what you're doing really well, and not feel like you're doing it for the sake of a promotion. And I think that checking in on those things, right? So you have typically a biannual 360 process, making sure that you're setting up time monthly, quarterly, whatever, to check in on those things that you both agreed to work on, and say like, hey, this is some examples of how I've been working on this. Like, I would love your feedback on how else I could broaden this skill set. So I think making sure just like scheduling time for it and making it a part of your routine is a great way to showcase your skill set without feeling like it's too much all the time.
Yeah, that's great.
And make sure that the first conversation you have in regards to this is not when you're looking for that promotion. Right? This should be a collaborative process between you and your manager, where you start the conversation saying, here are things that I'm thinking about. What do you think about the things that I'm thinking about? And turn this into a collaboration so you can find out what a great next step within the organization would be for you. And that's when you start to build all that that strategic routine that Claire was highlighting into that project or that plan, right? That's when you start to build the goals. You have regular check-ins and you find out how well you've delivered against those goals. Make sure that you should drive this. Don't let your manager drive this. If you're in an environment where your manager starts the conversation, you're really fortunate. You should be driving this yourself and making sure you have an opportunity to talk this through and put a plan in place.
I love that. I always say your one-on-ones are only as effective as you make them as the individual contributor. Because your manager is managing 17 other people sometimes. So they're as effective as you make them. And I love the idea of setting up that expectation from the beginning. So, and I am still working on this because I know I haven't been great at this in the past. Oftentimes in operations, you're working with two different leaders. So you're working with the CS leaders and you're working with like the CRO or the revenue operations team. So you kind of have to appease both. And the reason I say that is because it's been hard and I haven't been the best at it. And so I would say, set some goals with your manager. So set that time up and make sure that those goals are aligned to their goals and the company's goals. So like collaborate, make sure you both agree on those. And the thing that I would say would make you stand apart from others is being able to make those results objective because they're data driven. So in some way, if you can say, here's the project or the client or whatever that I managed or saw through, and this is the impact that we saw in a very data driven way, it makes it objective. So you don't feel like you're tooting your own horn. You're like, the writing's on the wall. I'm so great at my job, so I don't know that. I mean, it's something that we're always working on, but setting those goals, making sure everybody agrees upon them, and then being able to show what you did backed by data has helped me.
Yeah, that's amazing. So there's a good segue to a question we've got in the chat here, which is around one-on-ones. How do you make your one-on-ones fruitful when your manager doesn't come prepared with other than conversational topics? So if they're coming into a one-on-one and the only thing they're getting is shooting the breeze and asking about how you're doing in your life, how do you make a one-on-one with your leader more productive for your own career trajectory? Any takers?
Yeah, I mean, I love this because again, I'm super passionate about this. I'm very passionate that your one-on-ones aren't going to be productive if you're not prepared for them. So in what I've done in the past that's really helped me is throughout the week, I keep a one-on-one doc wherever that is. And I don't even need to have that shared with sometimes it's just notes on my phone. And I'm like, I need to talk to them about this. So every time I'm running up against a problem, every time I have like a quick question or anything that I like want feedback on, I keep notes of it. And so I will say 90% of the time I'm driving the one-on-one with the things that I'm running up against throughout the week. So, and honestly, your manager will love you for that too. I mean, I think a manager probably doesn't want to just come to your one-on-one and shoot the breeze either. And so if it feels like, if you can come with the conversational and the topics that you are invested in to talk about, whether that be personal development, or just like problems in your day-to-day work life, I think that will make those really productive.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Huge agreement across the board here. I have a ongoing Google Doc, right? And I think sharing what you need and what your kind of expectations are. Now I kind of have this from both lenses, right? But I view one-on-ones, with my manager as my time to get all of my questions answered. And so my manager's preparedness is reflective of sort of like, have I communicated these things? Are they in a doc that they have visibility into so that they can come prepared? Am I frequently communicating kind of what I'm working on? And am I linking all of the docs in there to make it easy for them? Am I creating an agenda for every single one of our one-on-ones, right? And so if I'm not doing that and I feel like I'm not getting what I need out of it, I think having that candid conversation of like, hey, I feel like, our one-on-ones could be more tactically productive. So how can I improve on these, and how can I improve on interactions? And hey, here's some things that I would love to see from you for the next one-on-one, and what can we do to make them more fruitful? But I think finding out what works for various people, and what has always worked for me, is making sure that I have a list, and then oftentimes my list is pretty substantial. And so I've then gone to prioritizing that list. So if I only get to 3 of my 10 bullets, I know that I get to the 3 most urgent ones. And I know that in those bullets are linked docs to all of the things that I'm referencing and need. And so I would turn it around and say, like, it is your time. It is your responsibility. And it is a way for you to help kind of show what good looks like. And I think that if you're, getting into promotion season and you come incredibly prepared into every single one-on-one, that's just going to be more ammo for kind of you to progress in your career.
I love to be held accountable in one-on-ones. There's an element of give and take in these conversations where there are roadblocks that you are supposed to help solve or overcome for your team. And if one of my team members comes to me and isn't prepared to have that conversation and hold me accountable for deliverables, then it's really easy to, from a priority standpoint, it's really easy to move that lower on the priority list. But if someone comes to me and I know every time I'm sitting down with them in that one-on-one, because history dictates this, they're going to bring this roadblock up and I'm going to have to be held accountable to what progress was made on it, I'm going to be ready for that. And so I expect the same type. It's that give and take, right? I'm going to hold my team accountable for delivery. I want them to hold me accountable for delivery as well in the same fashion. And so those one-on-ones are really yours. If your leader does not come prepared with an agenda or with initiatives or expecting results on specific initiatives that you guys are working on, then take advantage of that and hold them accountable for the initiatives that you're driving with them.
Yeah. Very last thing is I would, somebody else said this, but if you are looking for more personal development, I've sent my managers notes a day or 2 before my one-on-one and say, hey, I really want to talk about this in our next one-on-one. Is that okay? And it just gives them a little bit more time to prep as well. So and then I think what you'll get out of that is going to be more thoughtful than just on the fly what they thought about this specific topic. So I would also, prep them if you are trying to go over more personal or like professional development during your one-on-one.
Yeah, I love both of those. And I think to JP and Saydie's point is If you find that you're not getting what you need, I think, so one of the things is like taking really good notes in your one-on-one. And if you have shared ownership and commitment to different projects, put a list of action items at the bottom of your one-on-one, right? And so at the end of it, say, hey, to recap, I'm going to work on this. You're going to work on this. Here's the ETA. And in the following week, have the first agenda item be a follow-up of those action items. So it's a great way to have mutual accountability and show that you've been working on something, and a continued date if that is not getting executed on by your manager.
I love this. This has been an amazing conversation. I know we're at time here. I apologize to the attendees if we didn't get to your question. We've got about a dozen or so more that we didn't get answered. I wanted to make sure we get out on time here. Thank JP, Saydie, and Clare for their expertise, their time, and their thoughts and knowledge with us. A few things that have come up is finding a mentor, right? And I'm doing this without asking these people's permissions, but I'm sure, knowing Clare, Saydie, and JP here, these are incredible people to be following. If you're not following them on LinkedIn, I'm sure if you have additional questions, I doubt any one of them would shirk at answering your question through a LinkedIn message or connecting on LinkedIn. If you're looking for people to follow and be a mentor virtually, these are three incredibly successful individuals and have amazing trajectory in their careers in a customer success environment. So do yourself a favor, follow them on LinkedIn, connect with them, ask questions, pick their brains. I'm sure every one of them, the three of them would happily help in any situation, as they have today for our expert conversation. So thank you again, JP, Saydie, and Clare. We appreciate your time, and thanks for the attendees and the engagement and questions we got. And we will end here. So thanks again.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.